Daniel sat on the cold stone bench in Plaza Mayor, Madrid, on Christmas Eve, 26 years old and completely invisible to the world rushing past him. His hands trembled not just from the December chill, but from the weight of a decision he had been contemplating for weeks. Nobody would notice if he simply disappeared. Nobody would care. But what happened in the next few hours would shatter everything he believed about being alone. Stay until the end, and you'll witness a story of faith and testimony that will strengthen your soul. And don't forget to leave a like. But to understand how Daniel arrived at this breaking point, we need to go back to where it all began. 26 years earlier, on a rainy autumn morning in 1999, a newborn was found wrapped in a thin blanket outside the emergency entrance of Hospital Universitario La Paz in Madrid. No note. No name. Just a baby with dark eyes that seemed to search for something he would never find. The nurses named him Daniel, after the hospital chaplain who discovered him. His surname, Rocha, came from the stone steps where he was abandoned, a cruel reminder that his first bed was made of cold rock. The state became his guardian. His childhood was a rotation of foster homes, each one a temporary station where he never quite belonged. In the first home, the Martinez family in Carabanchel, he was the quiet boy who watched other children get adopted while he remained. He remembered being 7 years old, standing in his Sunday best as a couple walked through the room, their eyes scanning the children like shoppers at a market. They smiled at him, asked his age, then moved on to a younger girl with blonde curls. Daniel learned early that being overlooked was his natural state. By age 10, he had lived in 4 different homes. The Garcia family in Vallecas kept him for 2 years, the longest he had stayed anywhere. Senora Garcia was kind but overwhelmed with 6 other children. Daniel became the invisible one, the boy who ate quietly, did his homework without being asked, and never complained. He thought if he was good enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, maybe someone would finally choose him. But when his 12th birthday arrived, he was transferred again. Budget cuts, they said. Too many children, not enough resources. The teenage years brought him to a group home in Usera, a neighborhood where hope went to die. 15 boys crammed into a building that smelled of bleach and broken dreams. The older kids bullied him relentlessly. They called him El Fantasma, the ghost, because he moved through rooms without leaving an impression. Daniel stopped trying to make friends. He built walls around his heart, thick and impenetrable, convincing himself that solitude was strength. School was his only refuge, not because he excelled, but because, in the chaos of the classroom, he could disappear into the background. His grades were mediocre, his participation minimal. Teachers rarely remembered his name. During group projects, he was always the last one picked, an afterthought added to balance the numbers. During lunch breaks, he sat alone under the eucalyptus trees in the courtyard, watching groups of friends laugh and share secrets he would never be part of. At 16, the system released him. Emancipated, they called it, as if he had won some sort of freedom. They gave him a small monthly stipend and wished him luck. Daniel found a tiny room in a shared apartment in Tetuan, working nights at a 24-hour gas station to cover rent. His roommates were strangers who passed him in the hallway without acknowledgement. Perfect. The next decade became a blur of survival. He worked at the gas station for 2 years until it closed down. Then he washed dishes at a restaurant in Malasaña for 8 months before they replaced him with someone's cousin. He stocked shelves at a supermarket in Chamberí, delivered packages on a bicycle through the narrow streets of La Latina, cleaned office buildings in the financial district while the city slept. Every job was temporary. Every connection superficial. Every day, a reminder that he was fundamentally forgettable. By 23, Daniel had moved 9 times. Landlords always found reasons not to renew his lease. The rent was increasing, they said, or they needed the room for family. He learned to live out of 2 suitcases, never unpacking completely, never decorating walls he would soon leave behind. His possessions fit into a few bags because attachment to things, like attachment to people, only led to loss. Romance was a foreign concept. He had tried twice. At 21, he worked briefly at a cafe in Chueca, where a co-worker named Elena smiled at him warmly. They went for coffee once, walked through Retiro Park, and he felt something stir in his chest. Something dangerous, like hope. But when he called her the next week, she didn't answer. He saw her later with another co-worker, their hands intertwined, and realized he had misread kindness for interest. He was background noise in her story, not a character. The second attempt came at 24. Maria, a customer at the electronics store where he worked assembling online orders in the back warehouse. She came in weekly, and one day struck up a conversation while he was covering the register. They exchanged numbers. They texted for a month. He let himself imagine a future, something beyond the gray monotony of his existence. But when he finally gathered courage to suggest meeting outside the store, she confessed she had a boyfriend. She thought they were just friends. Of course she did. Everyone did. Daniel stopped trying. He convinced himself that solitude was his destiny, that some people were meant to walk through life alone. He found a strange comfort in this belief. If he expected nothing, he could never be disappointed. If he wanted nothing, he could never be hurt. But comfort and numbness are not the same thing. And as 25 became 26, the numbness began to crack. The darkness started small. A thought here and there, fleeting and easy to dismiss. What would happen if I just didn't wake up tomorrow? Would anyone notice? His landlord would eventually, when rent went unpaid. His manager at the current job, a warehouse in Villaverde where he packed shipments, would find someone else within days. But would anyone mourn? Would anyone remember? These thoughts grew louder through the autumn of 2025. They whispered to him during sleepless nights in his current room, a basement apartment with a small window that barely let in light. They shouted at him during lonely meals, instant noodles eaten standing at the kitchen counter because sitting at a table alone felt too pathetic. They screamed at him on his 26th birthday in November, which he spent working a double shift because what else was there to do? Christmas approached, and Madrid transformed into a wonderland of lights and joy that felt like mockery. Families crowded the streets, children squealing with excitement, couples walking arm in arm through markets fragrant with roasted chestnuts and mulled wine. Daniel moved through this celebration like a shadow, unseen and unwanted. The contrast between the world's joy and his emptiness became unbearable. On Christmas Eve, he couldn't face his empty room. He walked through the streets aimlessly, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his thin jacket, watching the city celebrate. He had nowhere to be, nobody waiting for him, no tradition to uphold. The realization hit him with crushing force. He had lived 26 years without leaving a single mark on the world. Leave a comment and let us know where you're listening from, and don't forget to follow the channel. The cold drove him toward Plaza Mayor, where the Christmas market was winding down. Vendors packed up their stalls, families hurried home for late dinners, and the massive Christmas tree in the center of the plaza glittered with lights that hurt to look at. Daniel found an empty bench near the edge of the square, away from the thinning crowds. He sat down and stared at nothing, his mind cycling through the same dark thoughts that had become his constant companions. What was the point? Of waking up? Of working jobs that meant nothing? Of existing in a world where he was invisible? The thoughts weren't dramatic or theatrical. They were quiet and logical, almost mathematical. His life had no purpose. Therefore, his life had no value. Therefore, cold night to be sitting alone. Daniel jerked his head up. An old man stood a few feet away, bundled in layers of worn clothing that marked him as homeless. His face was weathered by time and hardship, his gray beard uneven, his eyes kind in a way that made Daniel immediately suspicious. Nobody was kind without wanting something. "I'm fine," Daniel said, turning away, hoping the man would leave. But the man didn't leave. He moved closer, not threateningly, just present. "Mind if I sit? My feet are killing me." Daniel shrugged, which the man took as permission. He lowered himself onto the bench with a groan, stretching his legs out. For a long moment, neither spoke. The plaza continued its transformation from celebration to silence, the last vendors wheeling away their carts, the lights seeming brighter against the darkening sky. "I have coffee," the man said eventually, pulling a dented thermos from his coat. "Not fancy, but it's hot." "Want some?" Daniel's first instinct was to refuse, but the cold had seeped into his bones, and the idea of warmth, even from a stranger's charity, was too tempting. "Sure." The man poured coffee into the thermos cap and handed it to Daniel, then took a sip straight from the thermos. The coffee was terrible, bitter and weak, but it was hot, and Daniel wrapped his hands around the small cup gratefully. They sat in silence, drinking bad coffee on Christmas Eve, two men who had nothing and no one. Except Daniel realized the man wasn't trying to make conversation or ask for anything. He was just there, present in a way nobody had been for Daniel in years. It was strange, uncomfortable, almost peaceful. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," the man finally said, his voice gentle. Daniel laughed bitterly. "That would require mattering enough to carry anything." The man nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense. Feeling invisible? The question struck Daniel like a physical blow. How did this stranger know? He must have shown something on his face, because the man smiled sadly. "I know that feeling," the man continued. "That sense that you could vanish, and nobody would notice. That you're living but not really alive. Just going through motions, waiting for something that never comes." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He hadn't talked to anyone, really talked, in months, maybe years. And here was a homeless man describing the exact landscape of his inner hell. "Why do you care?" Daniel asked, his voice rough. "Because you're here," the man said simply. "That's reason enough." They fell back into silence, but it felt different now, less isolating. The man didn't push for conversation, didn't pry or prod. He just existed beside Daniel, sipping his coffee, watching the plaza empty. Then the man spoke again, his voice quiet but clear. "I remember when you were 7 years old, standing in that living room in your Sunday clothes, trying so hard to be perfect. You thought if you smiled wide enough, stood straight enough, Maybe they would choose you." Daniel's blood turned to ice. He turned to stare at the man, his heart pounding. "What did you say?" The man's eyes were distant, as if seeing into the past. "You wore a blue shirt with a small stain on the collar that you tried to hide with your hand. You practiced your introduction for hours. My name is Daniel. I'm 7 years old. I like reading and drawing." But when the moment came, your voice was so small, they had to ask you to repeat it. Nobody knew that. Nobody could know that. Daniel had never told anyone about that day, about the shame and rejection that had carved itself into his soul. His hands trembled, coffee sloshing in the cup. "The Garcia house," the man continued softly. "You had a favorite spot in the back garden, behind the shed where nobody looked. You would sit there and imagine you were somewhere else, someone else, someone chosen." "Stop," Daniel whispered, but the man continued. "Your 12th birthday. You didn't cry when they told you that you were being transferred. You just nodded and packed your bag. But that night, in your new room at the group home, you pulled the blanket over your head and sobbed until you couldn't breathe. You thought you were alone." Tears were streaming down Daniel's face now, hot against the cold air. "How do you know these things? Who are you?" The man turned to look at him fully, and his eyes held depths Daniel couldn't comprehend. Sadness and love and something eternal. "Daniel, do you really think you've been walking through this life alone?" "I am alone," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I've always been alone. Nobody sees me. Nobody knows me. Nobody cares if I live or die." "That's not true," the man said firmly. "It has never been true. Not on the day you were left on those stone steps. Not during those endless nights in the group home. Not in any of the dark moments when you thought the pain was too much to bear. You have never, not for one single second, been alone. Don't go now. What's about to happen you won't believe. And leave a like if you're enjoying this." Daniel shook his head, unable to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. The man couldn't know these things, but the memories he described were perfect, down to details Daniel had buried so deep he barely remembered them himself. "The night you turned 21, the man said, his voice gentle, "you walked to the bridge over Manzanares River. You stood there for 2 hours, looking at the water, thinking how easy it would be to just let go. But you didn't. Do you remember why?" Daniel did remember. He had been about to climb over the railing when a woman walking her dog stopped and asked if he had the time. Such a mundane question, but it had broken the spell. He told her the time, she thanked him, and walked on. And the moment had passed. He had convinced himself it was just coincidence, random chance. "That woman's dog didn't usually pull on the leash," the man said. "But that night, he pulled her exactly to that spot, at exactly that moment. Nothing in your life has been random, Daniel. Nothing has been coincidence." "I don't understand," Daniel sobbed. "If someone cared, if someone was watching, why did they let me suffer? Why was I abandoned? Why has my entire life been pain?" The man reached out and placed a weathered hand on Daniel's shoulder. The touch was warm, impossibly warm, like sunlight concentrated into a single point. Because pain carves out spaces in our souls that only love can fill. Because the darkest nights teach us to recognize the light. Because your suffering, as terrible as it has been, is not the end of your story. It's not even the middle. What do you mean? The man smiled, and for a moment, Daniel could swear light emanated from behind him, though that was impossible because the plaza's lights were in front of them. Daniel, you think your life has no purpose because you've spent it alone. But what if your purpose is to understand loneliness so deeply that you can recognize it in others? What if your pain prepares you to be the one who sees the invisible, who reaches for the forgotten, who sits with the broken? I can't do that, Daniel said. I can barely keep myself alive. Not alone, no, the man agreed. But you're not alone. You never have been. The man stood, and Daniel felt panic rise in his chest. Don't leave. Please don't leave. The words caught in his throat. Tomorrow, the man said, looking down at Daniel with infinite kindness. Something unexpected will happen. When it does, remember this conversation. Remember that every detail of your life has been seen, known, and held. Remember that the one who formed you in your mother's womb did not abandon you on those steps. He carried you through every dark valley. And he has plans for you, Daniel. Plans for hope and a future. Wait, Daniel stood, reaching out. I don't even know your name. The man's smile was radiant. You do. You've known it your whole life, even when you thought I wasn't listening. He turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Daniel? Learn to see others the way I see you. That's where you'll find your purpose. And then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the plaza's lights. Daniel stood there, tears drying on his face, coffee cup still clutched in his hand, his mind reeling. Had that really happened? The rational part of his brain said it was impossible. The man couldn't have known those things. It must have been lucky guesses, cold reading, something explainable. But his heart knew differently. His heart, which had been dead and cold for so long, suddenly felt alive. The weight that had pressed on his chest for months had lifted. He took a deep breath, the first real breath in so long, and it didn't hurt. Daniel walked home through the empty streets, his mind churning. The dark thoughts that had been his constant companions were still there, but they seemed smaller now, less convincing. Something had shifted. He didn't understand what or how, but for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something dangerous. Hope. He slept that night, actually slept, without the usual nightmare parade of regrets and failures. And when he woke on Christmas morning, sunlight was streaming through his basement window, which rarely happened. The angle had to be just right, and it was, illuminating his small room with golden light. His phone buzzed. A message from his manager at the warehouse. They needed someone to cover the holiday shift at double pay. Usually, Daniel would have ignored it, but something made him say yes. He got dressed and took the metro to Villaverde, arriving at the warehouse by 10 in the morning. The warehouse was mostly empty, just a skeleton crew handling emergency orders. Daniel was assigned to help a delivery driver named Miguel, who was sick but had insisted on working the holiday route. Miguel was maybe 50 years old, with kind eyes and a patient demeanor that reminded Daniel of someone, though he couldn't place who. They loaded the truck together, boxes of last-minute gifts that needed delivering. Miguel didn't talk much as they drove through the quiet city, but there was something comforting about his presence. At the third stop, an apartment building in Carabanchel, Miguel turned to Daniel. "You look different than usual," Miguel said. "Lighter somehow." Daniel shrugged, not knowing how to explain. "Had a strange night." "Christmas has a way of doing that," Miguel said with a smile. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Learn to see others the way God sees you." That's where you'll find your purpose." The words hit Daniel like lightning. His head snapped toward Miguel. "What did you say?" Miguel looked confused. "I said, Christmas has a way of doing strange things to people. Makes us see differently." "No, after that. The thing about seeing others." Miguel's face showed genuine confusion. "I don't think I said anything after that. Are you okay?" But Daniel had heard it. Clear as day. The exact words the man from last night had said. "Learn to see others the way I see you." Except Miguel had said, "God sees you." The connection crashed into Daniel's consciousness with overwhelming force. The man last night, the homeless man who knew everything, who spoke with such authority and love, the warmth of his touch, the light that seemed to emanate from him, the way he disappeared into darkness, and his final words, "You've known my name your whole life, even when you thought I wasn't listening." Daniel's hands began to shake. It couldn't be. Things like that didn't happen in real life. But Miguel's words, those exact words spoken without him even realizing it, felt like confirmation, like a sign, like someone trying to show Daniel that last night wasn't a dream or delusion. It was real. Jesus had sat with him on Christmas Eve. The realization should have felt impossible, but instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Of course, that's who it was. Who else would know every hidden moment of his life? Who else would sit with him in his darkest hour? Who else would speak with such intimate knowledge of his pain? If you're enjoying this, leave a comment and hit that like button. Daniel barely remembered the rest of the delivery route. His mind was spinning, reliving every moment of that conversation. The coffee they shared, the impossible knowledge, the warmth and light, the promise that he had never been alone. When they returned to the warehouse, Miguel clapped him on the shoulder. "You're good at this. You should apply for the delivery driver position. We're hiring." It was a casual comment, but to Daniel, it felt like another door opening. He thanked Miguel and went home, his mind still processing everything. That night, unable to sleep, he did something he hadn't done since childhood. He prayed. "I don't know if you can hear me," he whispered into the darkness. "But if last night was real, if you were really there, thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for not giving up on me. I don't know what to do now, but I'm listening. I'm ready." The room remained silent, but Daniel felt something shift. Not a voice or vision, just a profound sense of peace. He fell asleep with tears on his face, but they were different tears. Not the tears of despair he had cried for years, but tears of relief, of release. The next day, he applied for the delivery driver position. 3 days later, they offered him the job with a significant pay increase. It was the first good thing that had happened to him in years, but it wasn't the last. The new position changed his daily rhythm. Instead of spending hours in the dim warehouse, he was out in the city, meeting people, seeing the world. His routes took him through neighborhoods he had lived in years before, places he had fled from. But seeing them again through different eyes, he noticed things he had missed. The kindness of strangers, the small moments of connection. The world wasn't as cold as he had believed. In late January, he was delivering a package to an apartment in Salamanca, when the door opened to reveal a young woman struggling with a crying infant and what appeared to be a broken stroller. She looked exhausted and overwhelmed, trying to sign for the package while juggling the baby. The old Daniel would have handed over the package and left, but something Maybe that conversation on Christmas Eve, maybe the growing awareness that everyone was fighting invisible battles, made him stop. "Need help with that stroller?" he asked. She looked at him with surprise and gratitude. "Would you mind? I'm trying to get to the pharmacy before it closes, and this thing just fell apart." Daniel spent 15 minutes helping her fix the stroller mechanism. It wasn't a big thing, barely worth mentioning, but the woman's thanks were genuine, and he felt something warm bloom in his chest. He had helped someone. He had mattered, even in a small way. These moments began to accumulate. An elderly man struggling with groceries, a teenager who looked lost, a mother trying to carry too many shopping bags while wrangling two small children. Daniel started seeing people, really seeing them, the way he had been seen on that cold Christmas Eve. February brought its own surprise. Miguel, the patient driver who had become something of a mentor, invited Daniel to a community dinner at a local church. Daniel was hesitant. Churches had never been welcoming places in his experience, but Miguel insisted. "Just come for the food," Miguel said. "No pressure." The church, small and humble in the Puente de Vallecas neighborhood, was warm and loud with conversation. Families crowded around tables, children ran between chairs, and the smell of home-cooked food filled the air. Daniel felt out of place, but Miguel introduced him to people who welcomed him without question. He met Father Javier, an older priest with laugh lines around his eyes who didn't ask invasive questions. He met Carmen, who ran the community pantry and immediately recruited him to help organize donations. He met dozens of people who treated him like he belonged, like he mattered. But it was Anna who changed everything. She was helping serve food, moving through the crowd with easy grace, stopping to talk with each person. When she reached Daniel's table, their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. She had dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, eyes that crinkled when she smiled, and a presence that felt both grounded and luminous. "First time here?" she asked, ladling soup into his bowl. "Yeah," Daniel managed. "Miguel dragged me." She laughed. "Miguel has a talent for that. I'm Anna." "Daniel." They talked for only a few minutes. She had other people to serve, but Daniel found himself watching her throughout the evening. Not in a creepy way, he hoped, but with genuine curiosity. There was something about her that felt familiar, like recognition of a person you've known in your dreams, but never met in waking life. Over the following weeks, Daniel became a regular at the community dinners. He told himself it was because the food was good and the people were kind, which was true. But really, it was because Anna was there. They started talking more, small conversations that gradually deepened. Anna worked as a social worker in Vallecas, helping families navigate systems Daniel knew all too well. She had grown up in Madrid, had a close-knit family, and radiated a warmth that Daniel found both attractive and terrifying. She was everything he wasn't, connected and loved and secure. But she seemed genuinely interested in him. She asked questions about his life and actually listened to the answers. When he mentioned growing up in foster care, she didn't pity him or change the subject. She nodded and asked more questions, treating his experiences as valuable, as worthy of attention. In March, after a particularly successful community dinner, they walked together through the neighborhood. The evening was cool but pleasant, spring beginning to assert itself over winter's grip. They talked about everything and nothing, favorite books and terrible movies, dreams and disappointments. "Can I ask you something?" Anna said eventually. "Sure." "You have this way of seeing people, really seeing them. It's rare, Where did you learn that?" Daniel thought about Christmas Eve, about the homeless man who had seen him completely. "Someone taught me," he said. "Someone who saw me when I thought I was invisible." Anna smiled. "Sounds like a good teacher." "The best." B. They stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench, not quite touching but close. Daniel felt something building in his chest, something terrifying and wonderful. He was falling for this woman. Actually falling, not the superficial attraction he had felt before, but something deep and transformative. "Daniel," Anna said softly, "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting to meet you. Does that sound crazy?" "No," he whispered. "It sounds like Providence." They shared their first kiss there, in a small park in Vallecas, under the light of street lamps. And for Daniel, it felt like coming home to a place he had never been. It felt like being chosen. Their relationship developed naturally, without the awkwardness or misunderstandings that had plagued Daniel's previous attempts. Anna introduced him to her family, a warm and chaotic bunch who welcomed him with the same ease the church community had. Her mother hugged him, like she had been waiting for him. Her father shook his hand firmly and said, "Take care of our Anna." For the first time in his life, Daniel felt like he belonged somewhere, not just tolerated or temporarily housed, but actually belonging. Anna's family treated him like he was already part of them. They invited him to Sunday dinners, included him in family jokes, asked his opinion on everything from politics to football. In June, 6 months after meeting Anna, Daniel realized he wanted to spend his life with her. Not because he needed someone to fix his loneliness, but because being with her made him the best version of himself. She challenged him, supported him, loved him without trying to change the fundamental core of who he was. But he had no money for a proper ring. His salary was better than before, but saving was difficult. He mentioned this to Father Javier, who smiled knowingly. "Daniel, do you remember what you told me about Christmas Eve? About the man who sat with you?" Daniel nodded. He had eventually shared that story with Father Javier, who had listened without judgment or skepticism. If that meeting was divine, Father Javier said, "then perhaps this relationship is to trust the path you're on." The next day, something extraordinary happened. Daniel was cleaning out a storage closet at the warehouse when he found an old box of unclaimed lost and found items. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a simple gold ring. Not expensive or flashy, but beautiful in its simplicity. There was a note attached, "Unclaimed for over 5 years. Per company policy, can be disposed of or kept by finder." Daniel stared at the ring, his heart pounding. The timing was impossible. Or maybe, he thought, remembering Christmas Eve, the timing was perfect. He took the ring to a jeweler who cleaned it and confirmed it was real gold. "Excellent condition," the jeweler said. "Classic design. Whoever owned this had good taste." Daniel spent his entire savings to buy a small diamond to set in the band. It wasn't much, but it transformed the simple ring into something special. Something that represented hope and future and love. In July, on the anniversary of his worst year, the year he had considered ending his life, Daniel took Anna to Plaza Mayor. They walked through the square, now warm with summer sunshine, couples and families enjoying the evening. He led her to the bench where he had sat on Christmas Eve. "This place is special to me," he said, his voice trembling. "This is where my life changed, where I learned that I wasn't alone, where I started believing in hope and purpose and love." Anna looked at him with those warm eyes, and he saw his future reflected there. "Anna." He dropped to one knee, and she gasped. "You see me. Not just the surface, but all of me. The broken parts and the healing parts. You love me not in spite of who I am, but because of it. I spent my whole life thinking I was meant to be alone. But then I met you, and I realized I was just waiting for the right person. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she said yes. They held each other on that bench, in the spot where Daniel had once contemplated giving up, and now celebrated the beginning of something beautiful. The wedding took place in September, in the small church in Vallecas where they had met. Miguel walked Daniel down the aisle, having become the father figure Daniel never had. The church was packed with the community that had adopted Daniel, with Anna's extended family, with people whose lives he had touched in small ways over the past months. Father Javier performed the ceremony with joy and solemnity. When Daniel and Anna exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all circumstances, Daniel felt the weight of his past finally release its grip. He was no longer the abandoned boy. He was a man chosen and loved. At the reception, held in the church hall with food prepared by the community, Daniel stood to give a speech. His hands trembled as he held the microphone. "I'm not good at speeches," he began. "Most of my life, nobody listened to what I had to say anyway. But today, I need to say thank you. To all of you who welcomed a stranger. To Miguel, who invited me into this community. To Father Javier, who listened without judgment. To Anna's family, who made me part of yours. And most importantly, to Anna, who chose me." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. 8 months ago, I sat alone on a bench on Christmas Eve, convinced that my life had no value. I was ready to give up. But someone sat with me that night and showed me the truth, that I had never been alone, that every moment of my life had been seen and known and held, that my pain had purpose. And everything that's happened since, every blessing, every moment of joy, flows from that conversation. He raised his glass. So here's to the people who see the invisible, who sit with the lonely, who believe in second chances and divine timing. And here's to the mystery of grace, which finds us even in our darkest moments. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Anna came to his side, wrapping her arms around him, and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," he whispered back. "Thank you for choosing me." If you've made it this far, leave a like and let us know what you think of this story. Life after the wedding settled into a rhythm Daniel had never imagined possible. He and Anna moved into a small apartment in Carabanchel, ironically near one of his old foster homes. But now, walking those streets felt different. The neighborhood that had once represented rejection now represented new beginnings. His career continued to evolve. The delivery company promoted him to route manager, coordinating other drivers and optimizing delivery schedules. The increased salary allowed them to save for their future, to dream about maybe buying a home someday. But more than financial stability, Daniel found purpose in his work. He trained new drivers, many of them immigrants and refugees struggling to find their footing in Madrid. He recognized in their faces the same lost expression he had worn for years. He made sure to really see them, to remember their names, to ask how they were doing, and actually listen to the answers. One young driver, Hassan from Syria, reminded Daniel particularly of his younger self. Hassan was quiet and kept to himself, clearly carrying trauma. Daniel made a point of mentoring him, sharing coffee during breaks, offering advice not just about routes, but about life in Madrid. "Why are you so nice to me?" Hassan asked one day, his English heavily accented but improving. "Because someone was nice to me when I needed it most," Daniel said. "And because you matter, Hassan. Your story matters. You matter." Hassan's eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes I think nobody cares if I live or die." Daniel gripped his shoulder. "I care. This community cares. And I promise you, you're never as alone as you think you are. Even in your darkest moments, you're seen and known and loved." Hassan nodded, unable to speak, but Daniel saw something shift in him. The same shift that had happened in Daniel on that Christmas Eve. The realization that existence had meaning, that life was worth living. At home, Anna continued her work with families in crisis. Many evenings they would sit together and share stories from their days. Anna would talk about the single mother trying to escape domestic violence, the family facing eviction, the teenager aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. "We should do more," Daniel said one night in their small kitchen, sharing a simple dinner. "These stories, they're my story. I know what it's like to be that teenager." "What are you thinking?" Anna asked. "What if we became foster parents? Not now, maybe, but in the future. I know what those kids need. They need someone to see them." Anna reached across the table and took his hand. "I think that's a beautiful idea. When we're ready." The conversation planted a seed that grew over the following months. They attended information sessions about fostering, learned about the system Daniel knew too well from the other side, and prepared their hearts and home for the possibility. In November, exactly 1 year after his Christmas Eve encounter, Daniel returned to Plaza Mayor. He walked to the same bench, now empty on a crisp autumn evening, and sat down. He didn't know if he expected anything to happen, but he felt compelled to be there. He wasn't alone long. An elderly woman, hunched against the cold, shuffled toward the bench. She looked exhausted and lost, carrying plastic bags that seemed too heavy for her frail frame. "May I sit?" she asked in a thin voice. "Of course." Daniel moved over, making room. They sat in silence for a moment. Then, without overthinking it, Daniel pulled out his thermos. He had started carrying coffee, a habit from that Christmas Eve. "Would you like some coffee? It's hot." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You're very kind. Most people don't see me anymore." As he poured coffee into the cap and handed it to her, the words echoed in his mind. "Most people don't see me anymore." He understood that invisibility intimately. "I see you," he said gently. "And you matter." They talked for an hour. Her name was Rosa. She had been a teacher for 40 years. Her husband died 3 years ago. Her children lived abroad, and she spent most days alone in a small apartment, wondering if anyone would notice when she was gone. The loneliness was crushing. Daniel listened, really listened, the way the man had listened to him a year ago. And when Rosa's story poured out, all the grief and isolation, he shared his own story. About being abandoned, about feeling invisible his entire life, about the Christmas Eve that changed everything. "A man sat with me right here," Daniel said, gesturing to the bench. "He saw me completely, knew things nobody should know, told me I had never been alone, even though I had spent my whole life believing I was. That conversation saved my life. It gave me hope when I had none." Rosa was crying now. "I wish someone would see me like that." "I see you, Rosa," Daniel said firmly. "And I'm not the only one. There's a community, a church in Vallecas. Good people who would love to know you. Let me give you the address." He wrote down Father Javier's church information on a napkin. Rosa clutched it like it was precious. "Will you really be there?" she asked, vulnerability raw in her voice. "I'll be there Sunday," Daniel promised, "and I'll introduce you to everyone. You won't be invisible anymore, Rosa. I promise." When they parted ways, Daniel felt something profound. The love he had received on this bench a year ago wasn't meant to stop with him. It was meant to flow through him to others. He was the conduit, the connection, the one who could see the invisible because he had been seen. True to his word, Daniel was at church that Sunday. Rosa came, nervous and uncertain, and Daniel kept his promise. He introduced her to the community, made sure she felt welcome, sat with her during the meal. Within weeks, Rosa was a regular, her loneliness giving way to belonging. She started helping in the church kitchen, her teaching skills put to use tutoring children after school. One Sunday, she pulled Daniel aside. "You saved my life," she said simply. "I was planning to take pills that night you found me. I had them in my bag, but you saw me. You cared. You gave me a reason to keep living." Daniel hugged her, tears in his eyes. "Someone did the same for me. We're just passing it forward." The pattern repeated itself through the winter. Daniel found himself noticing people others overlooked. The tired cashier working 3 jobs, the immigrant struggling with Spanish, the teenager who reminded him so much of his younger self. Each time, he took a moment to see them, to speak kindly, to offer connection. Anna watched this transformation with wonder. "You're becoming exactly who you were meant to be," she told him one night. "I'm just doing what was done for me," Daniel said. "No," Anna insisted. "You're doing more than that. You're multiplying grace. Every person you help will help others. The impact spreads exponentially." In March, 2 years after meeting Anna, they submitted their application to become foster parents. The process was lengthy and invasive, background checks and interviews and home inspections. But Daniel understood it was necessary. The system, flawed as it was, tried to protect children. During one interview, the social worker asked Daniel about his own foster care experience. He was honest about the pain and isolation, but also about the transformation. "I spent most of my life angry at the system," he said. "Angry at the families who didn't choose me. Angry at a world that made me invisible. But I've learned that hurt people, and healed people, heal people. I can't change my past, but I can make sure other kids don't feel as alone as I did." The social worker, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled. "Mr. Rocha, in 20 years of doing this work, I've never heard a better answer. I'll be recommending approval." In June, they received their first placement. Carlos, age 14, had been in 7 homes in 3 years. He was angry and defensive, testing every boundary. He reminded Daniel painfully of himself. The first week was brutal. Carlos refused to eat with them, stayed in his room, responded to every kindness with suspicion or hostility. Anna worried they weren't equipped for this, but Daniel remained patient. "He's terrified," Daniel explained. "Every home he's been in has given up on him. He's waiting for us to do the same. We just have to prove we won't." Daniel didn't push. He simply made himself available. He knocked on Carlos's door each evening, not demanding conversation, just letting him know dinner was ready. He left notes in Spanish, Carlos's first language, saying simple things. Hope you slept well. Coffee's ready. Dutz, saw you like basketball. Game on tonight if you want to watch together. After 2 weeks, Carlos emerged from his room during dinner. He didn't say anything, just sat at the table and ate quickly, ready to bolt at any moment. Daniel and Ana chatted normally, including Carlos in conversation without demanding he participate. "There's a pickup game at the park tomorrow," Daniel mentioned casually. "I'm terrible at basketball, but I'm going. You're welcome to come if you want." Carlos grunted, non-committal. But the next day, he was waiting by the door when Daniel was ready to leave. They walked to the park in silence. When they arrived, Daniel introduced Carlos to the guys, mostly drivers from work and church community members. Carlos was good, really good. The anger and frustration found outlet in the game, and for 2 hours, he was just a kid playing basketball. When they walked home, sweaty and tired, Carlos spoke his first real sentence. "Thanks for bringing me." "Anytime," Daniel said. "You've got skills. We'll come back next week if you want." That night, Carlos ate dinner with them and answered a few questions. It wasn't a breakthrough, just a crack in the armor. But it was a start. Over the following months, Carlos slowly opened up. He talked about his mother, who struggled with addiction and couldn't care for him. About being bounced between relatives who didn't want him. About foster families who saw him as a paycheck or a charity case. "Why are you different?" Carlos asked one night, 3 months into the placement. Daniel thought about how to answer. "I grew up in foster care too. I know what it feels like to think nobody wants you. But someone showed me that I was never alone, even when I felt most abandoned. I'm just trying to show you the same thing." "You were in foster care?" Carlos seemed shocked. "Until I was 16. Group homes, temporary placements, the whole experience. I felt invisible for most of my life. Like I didn't matter. But you're successful now. You have a wife and a good job." "I do," Daniel agreed. "But not because I'm special or talented, because people started seeing me. Really seeing me. And that made all the difference." Carlos was quiet for a long moment. "Do you see me?" "Every day," Daniel said firmly. "I see a smart, talented kid who's been hurt but isn't broken, who's scared but brave enough to keep trying, who deserves a family that won't give up on him." Carlos's eyes filled with tears. "What if I mess up?" "You will mess up," Daniel said honestly. "We all do. But mistakes don't change your value. Nothing you do or don't do changes the fact that you matter, that you're worth fighting for." That conversation marked a turning point. Carlos began to trust them, slowly letting down his walls. He joined them for family dinners at Ana's parents' house. He started doing better in school. He laughed more, smiled more, seemed lighter. But the system had other plans. In October, Carlos's aunt, who had refused custody earlier, suddenly decided she wanted him. The social worker explained that biological family took priority. Carlos would be moved within the month. The news devastated everyone. Carlos had finally found stability, and it was being ripped away. The night before he left, Daniel sat with him in his room, helping him pack. "I don't want to go," Carlos said, tears streaming down his face. "She doesn't really want me. She just feels guilty." "I know," Daniel said, his own heart breaking. "And I'm sorry. This system isn't perfect. But Carlos, listen to me. These 4 months, they weren't wasted. You matter. What happened here was real. And no matter where you go, no matter what happens, you're not alone. You're seen. You're valued. You're loved. "Will you forget me?" Carlos asked in a small voice. "Never," Daniel promised. "You're part of us now. Always. We'll stay in touch. We'll be here if you need us." This isn't goodbye forever. Just goodbye for now. The next morning, when the social worker came to collect Carlos, Ana and Daniel held him tight. Father Javier came to pray with them. Miguel brought pastries from Carlos's favorite bakery. The community had rallied to show this boy that he mattered. "Remember what I told you," Daniel said as Carlos got into the car. "Learn to see others the way you've been seen. Pass it forward." Watching Carlos drive away was one of the hardest things Daniel had ever done. Ana cried in his arms for hours. They had failed. The system had failed. Carlos was going back to uncertainty. But 2 weeks later, they received a letter. Carlos had written in careful Spanish, translated by Ana. "Dear Daniel and Ana, thank you for seeing me. My aunt is trying, and I'm trying too. But even if this doesn't work out, I know now that I'm not invisible. You taught me that my life has value. Someday, when I'm older, I want to do what you do. I want to see the invisible kids and help them know they matter. Thank you for being my family, even if it was only for a little while. Love, Carlos." Ana read it aloud, both of them crying. "We did make a difference," she said. "We passed it forward," Daniel agreed. They continued fostering. Over the next 2 years, 5 more children came through their home. Some stayed for weeks, others for months. Each one carried wounds. Each one tested boundaries, and each one left knowing they had been seen. Not all the stories had happy endings. Some kids went back to difficult situations. Some aged out of the system without finding permanent homes. But each one took with them the knowledge that for a time they had mattered to someone. The community watched Daniel and Ana's work with admiration. Others began opening their homes to foster children. Father Javier started a support group for foster families. The movement spread, ripples of grace touching more and more lives. In December, 3 years after the Christmas Eve encounter, Daniel returned once again to Plaza Mayor. It had become a tradition, a pilgrimage of sorts. He sat on the bench as snow began to fall, thinking about everything that had changed. 3 years ago, he had been suicidal and hopeless. Now he was married, successful, and making a real difference in children's lives. The transformation was so complete, it sometimes felt unreal. "Mind if I sit?" Daniel looked up. A young man, maybe 23 or 24, stood nearby. He looked lost and cold, his eyes holding the familiar emptiness Daniel recognized instantly. "Please." Daniel moved over, and something in him stirred. The pattern was repeating. He was being given an opportunity to be for this young man what the mysterious stranger had been for him. He pulled out his thermos. "Coffee?" The young man nodded gratefully, and as Daniel poured, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For the grace that had found him in this very spot, for the love that had transformed his life, for the chance to pass it forward. They talked long into the night, Daniel and this stranger whose name was Marcos. And as Daniel listened to Marcos's story of abandonment and invisibility, he felt the weight of purpose. This was why he had suffered. This was why he had been saved. Not just for his own sake, but so he could be the light for others walking in darkness. When they finally parted, Daniel gave Marcos his phone number and the church address. "You're not alone," he said, the words echoing across time. "You've never been alone, and your story isn't over. The best chapters are still to come. Walking home through the snowy streets, Daniel felt overwhelmed with gratitude. He thought about the homeless man from 3 years ago, the one he now believed with absolute certainty was Jesus in disguise, the man who had known his deepest pain and offered hope when he had none. That encounter had set everything in motion. Meeting Anna, finding community, fostering children, mentoring others. The grace he received that night hadn't stopped with him. It flowed through him like a river, touching everyone he encountered. When he arrived home, Anna was waiting up. "How did it go?" "I think I just met someone I'm supposed to help," Daniel said. "Someone who needs to know he's not invisible." Anna smiled. "Then you know what to do." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "Pass it forward." That became their life's mission. Daniel continued his work, both at his job and in the community. He and Anna fostered 8 more children over the next 5 years. Some stayed longer than others, but each one learned they mattered. Each one was seen. Carlos stayed in touch. He graduated high school, started college, and told Daniel he planned to become a social worker. "Because of you," he said. "Because you showed me that hurt people can become healed people who heal people." Rosa, the elderly woman from the plaza, became like a grandmother to the foster children. She volunteered at the church, tutoring kids and offering wisdom earned through years of loneliness transformed into connection. Hassan, the Syrian driver, brought his whole family to the church. They became part of the community, and Hassan eventually bought his own delivery truck, hiring other refugees and giving them the same chance Daniel had given him. Miguel retired but remained active, telling everyone who would listen about Daniel's transformation. "I watched him go from barely surviving to truly living," he would say. All because someone saw him. The impact multiplied exponentially. Children who passed through Daniel and Anna's home grew up and opened their own homes to foster kids. People mentored by Daniel mentored others. The community expanded, became a movement, touched thousands of lives. On Daniel's 35th birthday, the church threw a celebration. Dozens of people came, each with stories of how Daniel had changed their lives. Carlos, now 23, and in his final year of social work school. Rosa, surrounded by grandchildren from the community. Hassan and his family. The countless foster children who had found hope in Daniel and Anna's home. Father Javier stood to give a toast. 9 years ago, a broken young man walked into our community. He thought he was invisible. He thought his life had no value. But someone saw him, loved him, and showed him the truth. And Daniel took that gift and multiplied it 1,000-fold. He learned to see others the way he was seen. And in doing so, he's transformed not just individual lives, but an entire community. The room erupted in applause. Daniel stood, overwhelmed with emotion, and Anna squeezed his hand. "I don't deserve this," he said when the room quieted. "You're right," Father Javier said with a smile. "None of us deserves grace, but that's the nature of grace. It finds us anyway. It transforms us anyway. And through us, it transforms the world." That night, lying in bed, Daniel thought about the journey. From abandoned newborn to suicidal young man to husband, foster father, and community leader. The arc of his story was so improbable, it could only be explained by divine intervention. He thought about the man on the bench 9 years ago, about the impossible knowledge and profound love, about the words that had changed everything. Learn to see others the way I see you. Those words had become his mission statement, his calling, his purpose. Every person he encountered, he tried to see them the way Jesus had seen him that Christmas Eve, not as invisible or worthless, but as infinitely valuable, deeply loved, and full of potential. "What are you thinking about?" Anna asked softly. "About being seen," Daniel said. "About how one moment of grace can change everything. About how we're called to pass it forward." "You've done that," Anna said. "You're still doing it." "We're doing it," Daniel corrected. "I couldn't do any of this without you." "We're a team," Anna agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "I'm pregnant." Daniel sat up, his heart pounding. "What?" "I found out today. We're going to have a baby." Tears streamed down Daniel's face. A baby. Their own child. After fostering so many children, after pouring out love to kids who weren't biologically theirs, they were going to have their own. "This is a gift," he whispered. "Another grace." "The first of many," Anna said. "This child will grow up knowing they're loved. They'll never doubt their value. They'll see you love others, and they'll learn to do the same." Daniel thought about the baby who had been abandoned on stone steps 35 years ago, about how that abandonment had felt like a curse for so long. But now he saw it differently. His pain had prepared him for purpose. His wounds had been transformed into wells of compassion. His child wouldn't be abandoned. But they would learn about abandonment through their father's story. They would see foster siblings come through their home and learn that family isn't just biology. They would grow up watching Daniel see the invisible, and they would learn to do the same. The cycle of grace would continue, passed from generation to generation, touching more lives than Daniel could imagine. If this story has touched your heart, rate this video with a like and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not invisible. Leave a comment telling us what part resonated most with you. In the years that followed, Daniel and Anna had 2 children, Maria and Santiago. They continued fostering, giving their biological children siblings of all backgrounds and stories. The kids grew up in a home where love was abundant and every person mattered. Maria, at age 7, once asked her father why they kept taking in foster kids when it was hard and sometimes heartbreaking. Daniel knelt down to her level. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "A long time ago, before you were born, I was very sad and alone. I thought nobody cared about me. But on a cold Christmas Eve, someone sat with me and showed me I was wrong. They saw me when I felt invisible. They loved me when I felt unlovable. And that changed my entire life." "Who was it?" Maria asked, eyes wide. Daniel smiled. "I believe it was Jesus, disguised as a homeless man. He knew things about my life nobody else could know. He told me I had never been alone, even when I felt most abandoned. And he said something I've never forgotten." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Learn to see others the way I see you.' That's why we foster, sweetheart. Because we're supposed to see people, really see them, the way Jesus sees us. Every person has value. Every person matters. And sometimes, all they need is someone to recognize that." Maria nodded seriously. "I want to see people that way too." "You already do," Daniel said. "I see you sharing your toys with Carlos's little brother. I see you including the new girl at school who doesn't speak Spanish well. You learned by watching, just like I learned by being seen." As the children grew, They did indeed learn. Santiago, at age 10, started a program at his school to welcome refugee children. Maria, at 12, volunteered at the church, helping with the community meals. They carried forward the legacy of grace. Daniel continued his work, now managing an entire region for the delivery company. But more importantly, he had become a voice for foster care reform. He spoke at conferences, sharing his story and advocating for better support for both children and foster families. "The system failed me in many ways," he would say, "but individuals within the system tried their best. We need better funding, better training, better support. But most of all, we need people who will see these children, not as problems to solve or statistics to manage, but as human beings with infinite value." His advocacy led to policy changes, more support for foster families, better training for social workers, increased funding for mental health services for children in care. Daniel's personal story became a catalyst for systemic change, but he never forgot where it started. Every Christmas Eve, he returned to that bench in Plaza Mayor, sometimes alone, sometimes with Anna, sometimes with their children. He would sit there and pray, thanking God for the grace that had found him in his darkest moment. On the 20th anniversary of that encounter, Daniel brought his whole family to the plaza. Maria was 17 now, Santiago 15. They had fostered 32 children over the years. Some stayed in touch, many didn't, but each one had been loved and seen. They sat together on the bench as snow fell gently around them. "Tell us the story again," Maria asked, even though she had heard it countless times. So Daniel told it once more. About being 26 and suicidal. About the homeless man who knew impossible things. About the coffee they shared and the conversation that changed everything. About the realization the next day, when Miguel unknowingly repeated the phrase that the homeless man had been Jesus himself. "Learn to see others the way I see you," Daniel quoted. "Those words saved my life, and they've guided every decision I've made since." "Do you think he'll come back?" Santiago asked. "He never left," Daniel said. "He's in every person we help, every foster child who finds hope, every lonely soul who finds community, every act of love and grace. That's how he moves in the world, through people who choose to see others the way he sees us." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the plaza come alive with Christmas Eve celebrations. Families laughing, children playing, people gathering together. The same scene that had felt like mockery 20 years ago now felt like invitation. Join us, it seemed to say. Belong. Matter. "I used to look at scenes like this and feel excluded," Daniel said. "Now I look at them and see opportunities. Opportunities to invite someone in, to see someone who feels invisible, to pass forward the grace I received." "That's beautiful, Papa," Maria said, resting her head on his shoulder. As they prepared to leave, a young woman approached the bench. She looked cold and lost, her eyes holding the familiar emptiness. Daniel caught Anna's eye and she nodded. They knew this script. "Excuse me," Daniel said gently. "We're about to head home for dinner. Would you like to join us? We have plenty of food." The young woman looked shocked. "I don't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing," Anna said warmly. "We have a tradition of welcoming strangers, especially on Christmas Eve. Please, come with us." As they walked through the snowy streets toward their home, their family expanded by one more person who needed to know she mattered. Daniel felt the pattern continuing, the grace multiplying, the love spreading. This was his life's work. Not the job title or the salary or the accolades. But these moments of connection, these opportunities to see people the way he had been seen. That night, around their dinner table crowded with family and a stranger who was becoming a friend, Daniel offered a prayer. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for seeing us when we feel invisible, for loving us when we feel unlovable, for meeting us in our darkest moments and offering hope. Thank you for the grace that transforms lives, that heals wounds, that multiplies exponentially through simple acts of love. Help us to see others the way you see us. Help us to pass forward what we've received. And remind us always that no one, absolutely no one, walks through this life alone." "Amen," the family chorused. Around the table, faces reflected the truth of Daniel's words. Maria and Santiago, biological children who grew up learning that family is bigger than blood. The foster children who had found love in this home. Anna, the woman who had been perfectly prepared to walk beside Daniel in this calling. Rosa, now 83 but still vibrant, still part of their family. Miguel, retired but present. Carlos, now a social worker himself, engaged to a wonderful woman. Hassan and his family. Father Javier. And the young woman they had just welcomed, who didn't yet understand how this moment would change her life. This was the multiplication of grace. One encounter on a cold Christmas Eve 20 years ago had created ripples that touched thousands of lives. And the ripples were still spreading, would continue spreading, exponentially growing with each person who learned to see others the way they had been seen. Daniel looked around the table, his heart full to bursting. 20 years ago, he had been ready to give up. He had believed his life had no value, no purpose, no hope. He had been convinced he was invisible. But he had been wrong. So wrong. He had never been invisible. Not on the stone steps where he was abandoned. Not in the foster homes where he felt forgotten. Not in the dark years of isolation. Not on that bench on Christmas Eve. Never. Someone had always been watching, always caring, always preparing the path. And when the time was right, that someone had revealed himself, had sat with Daniel in his darkness, had offered hope and purpose and love. The man on the bench had told him his suffering had purpose, that his pain would prepare him to see others, that his darkest nights would teach him to recognize the light. Every word had been true. Daniel's story wasn't about abandonment. It was about being found. It wasn't about invisibility. It was about being seen. It wasn't about worthlessness. It was about discovering infinite value. And most importantly, it wasn't about him. It was about grace, about love, about the way one encounter with the divine can transform not just a life, but countless lives through the generations. As dinner continued, laughter filling the room, Daniel caught sight of his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the man staring back. This confident, joyful person surrounded by love bore no resemblance to the broken young man on the bench 2 decades ago. Yet they were the same person. The transformation wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about becoming who he had always been meant to be. The man Jesus had seen on that Christmas Eve, full of potential and purpose, capable of extraordinary love. Learn to see others the way I see you. Those words had saved his life. Those words had given him purpose. Those words had created a legacy that would outlive him. And as he looked around the table at all the lives touched by grace, Daniel understood the profound truth. We are never alone. Even in our darkest moments, especially in our darkest moments, we are seen, known, and infinitely loved. All we have to do is accept that love and pass it forward. The story that began with abandonment on stone steps had transformed into a story of belonging, purpose, and multiplied grace. From invisible to invaluable. From forgotten to forever changed. From alone to surrounded by love. This was Daniel Rocha's testimony. This was the power of being seen. This was the miracle of grace. And the story continues, rippling outward, touching lives yet unknown, proving again and again that no one is ever truly invisible, because we are all seen through eyes of infinite love.